The first thing Dr. Kev noticed about the human was that she wouldn't stop complaining. This was unusual. Most patients who survived what the medical logs euphemistically called catastrophic molecular disruption events woke up either silent with shock or screaming. This one woke up, assessed her surroundings with the glazed focus of someone operating on spite alone, and immediately asked why the ceiling was so aggressively beige. "It's not beige," Kev said, manipulating the tissue regenerator over what remained of her left shoulder. "It's cream. The difference is significant to some species. It's depressing is what it is." The human's voice came out scratchy, damaged. Her throat had been exposed to superheated plasma. That she could speak at all was, according to every medical model Kev had consulted, somewhere between improbable and insulting to physics. "Where am I?" "Station Medical, Vein Sector Facility 12. You've been unconscious for 6 days." Kev adjusted the regenerator's frequency. The human skin was attempting to heal itself in ways that contradicted the machine's programming. Her cells were fighting the technology, winning even. "You're very much not dead, which is causing considerable confusion among my colleagues." The human tried to sit up. Kev didn't stop her. Pain was educational. She made it halfway before her body reminded her that large portions of it had recently been on fire. She settled back with a hiss that might have been a curse in one of Earth's many baffling languages. "What happened?" "You don't remember?" "I remember teaching basic chemistry to a room full of kids who thought ionization was boring." She closed her eyes. "Then I remember the reactor alarm. Then nothing. Then you positioned yourself between 17 juvenile colonists and a failing containment field." Kev finished. The explosion registered at 4.7 on the vein magnitude scale. The building no longer exists in any structural sense. You should also not exist in any structural sense. The human opened her eyes. They were brown, unremarkable, and currently filled with the kind of exhaustion that suggested she'd been tired long before the explosion. The kids? 13 survived with minor injuries. 4 have moderate burns. None will have permanent damage. Kev paused, considering how to phrase the next part. "You absorbed approximately 73% of the blast's kinetic and thermal energy. Your body became a crazy." He checked his translation matrix. "Meat shield. That's grotesque. That's accurate." Kev retracted the regenerator and made notes on his datapad. "Your skeletal structure fractured in 47 places. Your organs experienced acute trauma consistent with being struck by a cargo transport. Third-degree burns across 68% of your surface area. And yet somehow your brain remained functional. Your heart continued beating. You stabilized yourself while unconscious." The human processed this with the blank affect of someone who'd stopped being surprised by the universe's cruelty. "Okay? Okay? Okay?" Kev's facial membranes twitched, the vain equivalent of raised eyebrows. "You just learned you survived something that should have converted you into a dispersed carbon cloud. And your response is okay? What else am I supposed to say? Thank you for the detailed body horror recap." Kev liked her immediately. Vain medical professionals appreciated patients who didn't waste time with sentimentality. "There's something else." He pulled up a secondary screen. "Your name has been added to the ledger." "The what?" "Earth's Legends List. It's a galactic database maintained by, well, nobody's entirely sure who maintains it anymore. It catalogs humans who've done statistically impossible things and survived. Military actions, rescue operations, scientific breakthroughs achieved through what can only be described as weaponized stupidity." He scrolled through entries. "Your number's 6412. The human stared at him. "That's not a real thing." "It's extremely real. Every spacefaring species has access to it. Some governments use it for risk assessment when hiring human contractors. Others use it to justify hazard pay increases. Kev turned the screen toward her. Your entry went live 3 hours ago. She read it. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Something that looked like anger. Or maybe just profound weariness. This makes it sound like I'm some kind of hero. You threw yourself in front of an explosion to protect children who weren't even your species. 4 of them were human. 13 were not. So what? They were kids. They were my kids. She looked away from the screen. Anyone would have done the same thing. That, Kev said carefully, is the part that frightens everyone. The fractured coil wasn't the worst bar on outpost tours, but it was trying. The lighting had that specific amber quality that suggested either ambiance or faulty wiring. And the clientele represented the sort of species who'd learned to drink together without killing each other. Mostly .Z at Cart to Claven was losing an argument, which offended him more than the watered-down synthol. Look at the probability matrix. He projected the data from his wrist device onto the scratched table surface. Numbers cascaded in neat columns, each one reinforcing his point. 6,000 entries. 6,000. One species. Do you comprehend how statistically aberrant that is? Across from him, Threskin philosopher Morrow took a slow sip of something that smelled like fermented mud and victory. Her throat sac inflated slightly. Amusement, probably. Statistics don't account for cultural selection pressures. Humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill them constantly. Their entire psychological framework is built around saying no to death. That's not evolution. That's trauma. The third member of their group, a Gren merchant named Vok, was splitting his attention between the conversation and a card game happening 2 tables over. His upper arms gestured dismissively while his lower ones nursed a drink. You're both wrong. The ledger's just good marketing. Earth figured out that if they make their people look suicidally brave, everyone else will hire them for dangerous jobs. So it's propaganda? Zacht clicked his mandibles. Skepticism. You think they're faking catastrophic injuries for employment benefits? I think humans are very good at refraining stupidity as valor. Moru's throat sac deflated. Have you actually read any of the entries? Case file 297. A human cargo hauler who manually rerouted a fusion leak using his bare hands. Lost the hands. Saved 43 crew members. Case file 886. A human doctor who stayed behind during a station evacuation to finish surgery on a patient mid-operation. The station was on fire. Which proves my point, Vok said. Normal species evacuate during fires. Humans make artistic choices about when survival becomes optional. Zacht pulled up another screen. The newest entry went live today. Schoolteacher, Colony Outpost 7, reactor failure. She didn't just stay behind. She ran toward the explosion to cover students with her body. What species were the students? Morrow leaned forward. Mixed class. Majority non-human. That got Vok's full attention. All 4 eyes focused on the datapad. She died, obviously. No. 3rd-degree burns, multiple fractures, organ trauma. She's recovering. The table went quiet. Even the card game nearby seemed to pause, though that might have been coincidence. That's not possible, Zacht said finally. I've run the thermal calculations. The blast radius alone should have. Yes, didn't. Vok grabbed the datapad, scrolling through the medical reports. Says here, her cells are regenerating faster than the equipment can track. They're calling it anomalous healing. Response. They're calling it that because human is, apparently a synonym for, refuses to die on schedule. Morrow signaled for another. Drink. This is the 4th entry this cycle. The species is either incredibly unlucky or actively seeking opportunities to become martyr statistics. Zacht reclaimed his datapad, running new calculations. Game theory should apply here. When faced with lethal danger and available escape routes, the rational choice is always self-preservation. Children of another species don't factor into the survival equation. They're not genetic relatives, not pack members, not even the same biological category. You're thinking about it wrong. Moru's secondary eyelids closed. The Threskin equivalent of extreme patience with idiots. Humans don't calculate genetic benefit in crisis moments. They operate on something more primitive. What's the human word? Conscience. Conscience is just social conditioning, pretending to be moral instinct. Bach muttered. And yet, every species has some version of it. And only one species consistently lets it override survival programming. Moru tapped the table with one webbed finger. Old Earth philosopher named Camus said something relevant. A person's life purpose is nothing more than to rediscover. Through the detours of art or love or passionate work, those one or two images in the presence of which their heart first opened. Humans opened their hearts to the idea that protecting others matters more than protecting themselves. The families still want to meet you. Tell them I'm recovering. Tell them I'm unavailable. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. Kira collected her drones with a wing gesture. At the doorway, she paused. One final question. Not for the documentary. Personal curiosity. The teacher said nothing. Do you regret it? The silence stretched long enough that Kev almost intervened again. Then the teacher spoke, her voice flat and final. I regret that it was necessary. That's not the same thing. Kira left without another word. The camera drones followed. Their tiny lights blinking into darkness thought the message arrived on a secure channel, which meant it was either very important or very unwelcome. Given that the sender was listed as Earth Diplomatic Corps, Colonial Affairs Division, probably both. The teacher, who'd been cleared for discharge 2 weeks ahead of schedule because her body had decided convalescence was for quitters, read it on a datapad while sitting in a cramped transport cabin. She was heading to Outpost Rim 14, which had the dual advantages of being remote and not caring about viral footage. The message was professionally worded, which made the underlying panic almost funny. Dear Ledger Indectee 6412. Your recent inclusion has generated substantial interstellar discussion regarding human behavioral patterns in crisis scenarios. While we celebrate your actions, certain political complications have emerged. That required delicate navigation. She scrolled. Faster. Multiple species coalitions have submitted formal inquiries suggesting that human self-sacrifice tendencies represent either A. reckless endangerment of professional stability, or B. evidence of psychological abnormality requiring employment restrictions. The Claven Scientific Consortium has specifically proposed barring humans from educational, medical, and security positions in mixed species environments, citing unpredictable altruistic behavior as a workplace hazard. That was new. Getting banned from professions for not being selfish enough. Humanity had achieved many things, but this felt like a particularly absurd milestone. Additionally, the Vane Medical Institute has requested permission to study your neurological patterns. The Anthony Documentary Collective is appealing for follow-up interviews. And we've received 47 requests for your appearance at various conferences, symposiums, and cultural exchanges. The message concluded with the kind of paragraph that appeared friendly, but absolutely wasn't. In light of these developments, Earth's government would like to offer you a civilian commendation, a pension adjustment reflecting exceptional service, and a public relations liaison to help manage ongoing attention. We also respectfully request that you refrain from additional media engagement until diplomatic channels can establish clearer guidelines on discussing ledger entries. Attached were 3 documents: the commendation paperwork, a financial breakdown, and something titled Approved Talking Points for Public Discussion of Heroic Actions. She deleted all of it. Then she sent back a 4-word reply. Thanks, but I'm working. The transport docked at Rim 14 3 hours later. The station was exactly as advertised. Functional, understaffed, and blissfully uninterested in anything happening more than 2 sectors away. The kind of place where people came to work, not to be noticed. The school was smaller than her previous assignment. 1 building, modular construction, walls that hummed slightly when you leaned against them. The student population was listed as 32, ranging from 6 to 14 standard years, representing 9 different species. The administrator who met her was a Threscan named Poru, who had the exhausted demeanor of someone managing education on a budget that assumed children didn't need things like books or proper ventilation. You're the one from the footage, Poru said flatly. I'm a certified educator with 8 years experience in mixed species curriculum development. You're also the one from the footage. That too. Poru's throat sac inflated slightly. Consideration or indigestion? Hard to tell. Will it be a problem? Only if people make it one. Fair enough. Poru handed her a datapad with class rosters. You'll have the primary cohort. Ages 6 through 10. Try not to become famous again. The paperwork is exhausting. The classroom was standard. Adjustable seating for different body types. A projection wall for lessons. Emergency supplies that hopefully wouldn't be needed, but probably would eventually. Windows looked out onto the station's central corridor, where beings moved with the efficient indifference of people who had their own problems. Her students arrived in clusters. Some dropped off by guardians. Others arriving independently, with the confidence of children who'd learned to navigate station life early. They were small, varied, curious in the way young beings always were before the universe taught them to be careful. A human girl, maybe 7, sat in the front. 2 Clavan juveniles clicked quietly to each other near the back. A young Gren struggled with a chair that wasn't designed for 4 arms. Others filled in the spaces between. A vain child with oversized eyes. An Antary barely old enough for full feathers. A couple of species she'd need to check her roster to identify. She introduced herself using the name she'd been born with, not the ledger number people kept using. Explained the curriculum, basic sciences, literacy fundamentals, cultural awareness, normal things. They stared at her with the intensity of children who'd been told something interesting by their parents and were now investigating whether it was true. Finally, the Gren student raised one hand, then, remembering human customs, raised a second hand for emphasis. Double quotes, yes? Are you the teacher who got exploded? The classroom went very quiet. She could deflect, change the subject, redirect to something safer. Instead, she pulled over a chair and sat down so she was at their eye level, or as close as possible given the variety of eye placements. Yes. Didn't hurt? Very much. Why did you do it? This from the Antary, whose voice was still more chirp than speech. Because you people like you were in danger. And I was close enough to help. One of the Clavan children clicked rapidly, their translator device rendering it as, but you could have escaped. Our elders showed us the probability calculations. I could have. But then some of you might have gotten hurt worse. Why does that matter? The question came from the human girl, which somehow surprised her more than if it had come from another species. You don't know us. I don't have to know you to care if you're hurt. That doesn't make sense. The vain child's voice was soft, uncertain. Our survival instructor says you should always prioritize yourself in emergencies. That's how you stay alive. Your survival instructor is right. That's good advice. She paused, choosing words carefully. But sometimes there are things more important than staying alive. Like what? Like making sure the people around you have a chance to grow up, to learn things, to figure out who they're going to be. She looked at each of them in turn. "You're all just starting." It seemed wrong to let that end because of a broken machine. The Gren student processed this with all four eyes. Humans do stupid, brave things sometimes. Our parent says humans are dangerous because you don't value yourselves correctly. Your parent might be right about that too. Are you going to do it again? The human girl leaned forward. If something bad happens here. The honest answer sat heavy in her throat. The diplomatic answer would be easier. The approved talking points Earth's government had sent would be safest. She gave them the truth instead. I hope nothing bad happens here. I hope you all get to finish your education without any explosions or emergencies or situations where anyone has to make choices like that. She met the girl's eyes. But if something does happen and you need help, then yes, I'll be there. Because that's what adults are supposed to do. Stand between children and danger. Even when it's hard. Even when it's scary. Even when it hurts. The vain child again. Especially then. They sat with that for a moment. These small beings from 9 different worlds, trying to reconcile what they'd been taught about survival with what they were seeing in front of them. The human girl spoke first. I think that's stupid, probably. But also good, maybe. I don't understand humans. Most humans don't understand humans either. We're complicated. One of the Claven children clicked something their translator rendered as laughter. The tension broke. They started asking normal questions. What they'd be learning, whether there would be field trips. If she was going to assign homework on rest days. She answered each question, falling into the rhythm of teaching. The comfortable pattern of managing chaos and curiosity in equal measure. 3 weeks into the term, Poru appeared in the classroom doorway during lunch break, throat sac inflated to maximum capacity. Stress, definitely. We have a problem. The teacher looked up from grading assignments on her datapad. Define problem. The Claven Consortium filed a formal complaint with the Colonial Administration. They're citing your employment here as evidence of systematic human infiltration into positions of inappropriate influence. They want all human educators removed from mixed-species facilities, pending psychological evaluation. She set down the datapad slowly. They want what? It gets worse. Poru pulled up a holographic display. They've got support. The Vane Medical Council issued a statement agreeing that humans demonstrate aberrant protective behaviors incompatible with rational risk assessment. The Anthropcultural Institute is staying neutral, but they're not defending you either. So I'm being targeted for doing my job. You're being targeted for being ledger famous and human in a galaxy. That's decided both things are terrifying. Poru's throat sac deflated slightly. The hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Station Governance Chamber. They're bringing testimony from experts on human psychology, risk management specialists, and... She paused. Kira, the journalist. She's testifying about your unstable emotional responses during the interview. The teacher felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear, something harder. They're going to use my words against me. They're going to use everything. The footage. The medical reports. Your ledger entry. They'll argue that humans are too unpredictable for positions involving vulnerable populations. Poru's secondary eyelids closed. I'm sorry. I fought this. Administration fought this. But the consortium has political weight, and they're leveraging the hell out of it. What happens if they win? You lose your position. Potentially, all human educators in this sector lose their positions. It sets a precedent that could spread. Poru pulled up another screen. But there's something else. Something they don't know about. The hologram shifted, showing communication logs. Messages from dozens of sources, growing by the hour. After the consortium filed their complaint, it went public. And people started responding. Parents, former students, other educators. Poru scrolled through entries. A Gren family whose daughter was in your class 5 years ago on Outpost 9. They're offering testimony. 3 vain medical professionals who reviewed your case and disagree with the council's assessment. 2 Claven scientists who think the consortium is being ridiculous. Why would they risk speaking up? Because, Poru said quietly, not everyone thinks humans are dangerous. Some of us think you're necessary. The teacher stared at the logs. Names from species she'd taught, worked alongside, shared space with. Beings who decided that defending one human teacher mattered enough to challenge their own species' leadership. This isn't just about me anymore, is it? It never was. This is about whether the galaxy treats humans as equals or as liabilities. Poru closed the displays. You have 2 weeks to prepare. I'd suggest you contact Earth's diplomatic corps. I deleted their messages. Then undelete them. Because this hearing isn't just about your job. It's about whether humans belong in the community at all. That night, the teacher sat alone in her quarters, staring at the recovered messages from Earth's government. The commendation paperwork. The approved talking points. The careful, sanitized version of heroism they wanted her to represent. She deleted them again. Then she started writing her own testimony. Not about heroism or sacrifice or the mythological narratives everyone wanted. About the truth. About 17 children and a failing reactor, and the split-second calculation that geometry mattered more than survival. About being human in a galaxy that wanted them to apologize for it. Her datapad chimed. A new message, this one from an unfamiliar address. She opened it cautiously. Ledger inductee 6412. My name is Marcus Webb. Ledger number 4903. I heard about your hearing. I'll be there. You're not alone in this dot below his name. A list of others. Ledger inductees from across the sector. Dozens of them. Each one offering to testify. Each one another human who'd done something impossible and survived. She read through the names. The cargo hauler who'd lost his hands rerouting a fusion leak. The doctor who'd stayed behind during a station fire. A security officer who'd held a bulkhead closed during decompression until rescue arrived. On and on. Stories of humans refusing to let survival override conscience. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from something else. Something that felt like recognition. They weren't legendary. They were just humans, doing what humans did when systems failed, and someone had to be their dot. And now the galaxy wanted to punish them for it. She started a reply to Marcus Webb, then stopped. Instead, she opened a new document and began drafting something else. A coalition statement. Not defensive. Not apologetic. Just honest. We are human. We protect those who need protecting, even when it costs us. Especially when it costs us. If that makes us dangerous, then the galaxy has learned to fear the wrong thing. She sent it to Marcus Webb. Within an hour, 43 ledger inductees had signed it. By morning, the number had grown to 200. The station governance chamber was designed to accommodate multiple species, which meant it was uncomfortable for all of them equally. Tiered seating rose in concentric circles around the central platform where testimony would be given. The lighting was neutral white, the kind that revealed every flaw and hesitation. The teacher stood at the platform's edge, watching the chamber fill. Claven Consortium representatives in the upper tiers, their compound eyes reflecting cold calculation. Vain medical council members clustered together, facial membranes arranged in expressions of professional concern. And 3 observers perched on their designated rails, feathers pristine. Recording everything. And scattered throughout. Humans. Not just ledger inductees, though dozens had arrived. Regular people. Colonists, engineers, medical staff. beings who'd worked alongside humans and decided that showing up mattered. The presiding arbiter, a Threskin administrator named Kelv, called the session to order. Their throat sac remained neutral, professional. This hearing addresses the complaint filed by the Claven Scientific Consortium regarding the employment of human educators in mixed-species facilities. The consortium will present their case first. A Claven representative stepped forward, mandibles clicking as they spoke. We present evidence of systematic psychological aberration in human decision-making. Specifically, the tendency to prioritize non-kin survival over self-preservation, resulting in unpredictable and dangerous behavior in professional settings. They pulled up the footage. The explosion. The teacher running toward danger, covering students. The blast enveloping everything in white heat. This is not rational behavior. This is pathology. Note the deliberate movement toward the threat. Note the calculated positioning to maximize bodily shielding. This individual had a clear escape route with a 38% survival probability. Instead, she chose an action that reduced her survival chance to less than 4%. The Claven paused, letting the numbers hang in the air. We cannot allow individuals with such inverted threat assessment to occupy positions of authority over vulnerable populations. The risk is unacceptable. A Vane medical representative spoke next, pulling up neurological scans. Our analysis suggests that human brain architecture processes threats differently than other spacefaring species. Specifically, the presence of juveniles triggers protective responses that override self-preservation programming. This is a biological flaw, not a choice. We recommend mandatory psychological screening for all humans in educational, medical, and security positions. The testimony continued. Risk management specialists, probability theorists, cultural analysts explaining why human behavior represented a dangerous anomaly in galactic norms. Finally, Kira took the platform. Her feathers were arranged in what passed for sympathetic concern among Anthony. I interviewed this individual extensively. What I found was not heroism, but anger, resentment, an inability to accept gratitude or recognition. She explicitly stated that she resents being called a hero, that she views her own survival as unfortunate rather than miraculous. The Claven representative stood, mandibles clicking protest. This is, however, Kelv continued, the panel also finds that current safety protocols in mixed-species facilities are insufficient. The reactor failure at Colony Outpost 7 should never have occurred. Containment systems should not require individual intervention to prevent catastrophic failure. They looked at Rachel directly. Heroism should not be necessary. Prevention should be. Kelv's secondary eyelids closed. Therefore, the complaint against human educators is dismissed. Rachel Dorn is reinstated with full status. Additionally, the Colonial Administration will conduct comprehensive safety audits of all educational, medical, and residential facilities in this sector. Findings will be made public. Contractors found negligent will face penalties. They paused. Finally, we recommend that rather than restricting human employment, other species might benefit from studying why humans consistently choose protection over self-preservation. Not as pathology to be corrected, but as philosophy to be understood. The Claven representative stalked out, mandibles clicking fury. The Vane Medical Council members looked uncertain, their careful neutrality suddenly uncomfortable. But in the audience, parents were standing. Colleagues were applauding in their species-specific ways. Humans were crying, not from sadness but from exhausted relief. Rachel stood at the platform, trying to process what had just happened. Marcus Webb approached, artificial hands extended. She shook them, feeling the perfect synthetic grip. "Welcome to the club," he said quietly. "The one where we survive, and everyone tries to figure out what's wrong with us? Is it always this exhausting?" "Usually worse," He smiled. But sometimes it's worth it. When kids grow up safe. When families stay together. When the galaxy gets a little less comfortable with negligence because someone refused to accept it as normal. Rachel looked at the crowd. Her students' parents. Her colleagues. Beings from species she'd never met, who'd shown up because one teacher's job mattered enough to fight for. I still don't feel legendary, she said. Good. Legends are dead people. We're just humans, doing the work. The work of being dangerously altruistic? Marcus laughed. The work of proving that survival isn't the only thing that matters. 6 months later, Rachel stood in her classroom on Rim 14, watching her students work through a chemistry demonstration. The grandchild was carefully mixing compounds with all 4 hands. The Antares was taking detailed notes, feathers preened with concentration. The human girl was asking questions faster than Rachel could answer them. Normal. Beautifully. Impossibly normal. Her datapad chimed. Another message from Earth's diplomatic corps. This one actually welcome. The safety audits Kelv had ordered had uncovered systemic failures across 17 facilities. 3 contractors had lost their licenses. New regulations required redundant containment systems, improved emergency protocols, and notably larger budgets for education and healthcare infrastructure. Children were safer now, not because of heroism, but because negligence had consequences. The ledger had updated too. Entry 6412 now included a footnote. Actions resulted in colonial administration policy reforms improving safety standards across 14 sectors. She'd tried to have it removed. They told her the ledger didn't accept edit requests. Apparently, surviving impossible things meant your privacy became galactic property. Marcus. Webb had sent a message that morning. Congratulations on your footnote. Mine just says, lost hands, save ship. You're overachieving. She'd sent back, still not legendary. His reply, keep telling yourself that. The class period ended. Students packed their materials, chattering in multiple languages and clicking patterns. The grandchild paused at the door. Teacher Rachel? Yes? My parents says you're famous now. That you changed laws. The laws changed because they needed changing. I just happened to be there when everyone noticed. The child processed this with all 4 eyes. So you didn't mean to be important? I meant to keep you safe. Everything else is what other people decided it meant. Oh. The child's upper arms gestured something like understanding. That makes sense, I think. You're still weird, though. Humans are weird. Extremely weird, Rachel agreed. Now go, or you'll be late for your next class. After the students left, Poru appeared in the doorway. You have visitors. Rachel looked up. 2 figures stood behind the administrator. A young, vein with nervous facial membranes, and a human teenager with familiar brown eyes. This is Kieran, the vein said. I was one of your students at Colony Outpost 7. I'm enrolled in medical school now. University of New Volta. Rachel stood slowly, recognition clicking into place. You sat in the back row. You always asked about chemical reactions. You always had answers. Kieran's membranes shifted. I wanted to thank you. They stopped. For everything. The human teenager stepped forward. I'm David. I wasn't there that day, but my sister was. She's studying to be a teacher now. Because of you. He paused. We don't want anything. We just wanted you to know that what you did mattered. Not the legendary stuff. Just the fact that you stayed. Rachel felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking. Opening. You didn't have to come all this way. Yes, we did, Kieran said simply. Because you stayed when you didn't have to. That means something. Even if you don't think it does. They talked for 20 minutes. About their studies, their plans, their futures. The futures that existed because a reactor had failed. And someone had refused to let that be the end of the story. After they left, Rachel sat alone in the classroom again, staring at the projection wall where tomorrow's lesson plan was displayed. Basic chemistry. Ionization principles. The same concepts she'd been teaching when the alarm went off 6 months ago. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Her datapad chimed one more time. Not a message, just a notification that the ledger had updated again. Entry 6593. Another human. Another impossible thing. She read it out of habit now. These stories of people who decided that surviving wasn't enough if it meant leaving others behind. A cargo pilot who'd landed a failing ship in a crowded spaceport instead of ejecting over empty space. 400 civilians on the ground. The pilot walked away with a concussion and a ledger number. The galaxy still didn't understand. Probably never would. Species that had evolved past self-destructive altruism would always view humans as aberrant. Dangerous, unpredictable, but somewhere in 14 sectors. Children were learning in safer facilities because one teacher had gotten angry about insufficient safety protocols. Somewhere in the void, cargo haulers had better emergency systems because a man had lost his hands and everyone realized that shouldn't have been necessary. The ledger wasn't just a list of impossible survivals. It was evidence. Proof that humans valued each other more than safety, more than comfort, more than the cold mathematics of self-preservation. It was proof that conscience could be louder than calculation. Rachel pulled up tomorrow's lesson plan and added a new section. Emergency protocols and disaster response. Her students should know what to do if systems failed. They should understand evacuation procedures, shelter-in-place protocols, emergency communication channels. They should also know that sometimes, despite all preparation, things would go wrong. And when they did, there would be people imperfect, stubborn, dangerously altruistic people who would stand between them and danger, not because it was rational. Not because it calculated correctly, but because some things mattered more than survival. The classroom lights cycled to evening mode. Outside the windows, the station continued its endless routine. People going about their lives, mostly safe, occasionally vulnerable, always needing each other in ways that defied statistical analysis. Rachel saved the lesson plan and stood. Her body still ached sometimes. Phantom pains from injuries that had healed, but left their mark. Reminders that survival came with costs. But as she walked through the empty classroom, she thought about 17 children who'd grown 6 months older. About Kieran studying medicine. About David's sister becoming a teacher. About futures that existed because someone had decided math mattered less than lives. The galaxy would keep debating. The ledger would keep growing. Humans would keep doing impossible things for simple reasons. And somewhere, always, there would be children who needed protecting. Systems that would fail. Moments when choice came down to calculation or conscience. Rachel locked the classroom door and headed to her quarters, already planning tomorrow's lessons. She wasn't legendary. She wasn't aberrant. She wasn't anything the galaxy's definitions tried to make her. She was just human. It was enough. The end. You're quoting human philosophy at me. Human philosophy explains humans better than your probability matrices. My probability matrices are universal. Your probability matrices assume rational actors. Humans are not rational actors. Moru pulled up footage on her own device. Grainy head-mounted camera perspective. Watch. The video played. Alarm shrieking, people running in every direction, and then there, one figure moving against the tide of evacuation. Into the danger. Toward the failing reactor. She grabbed students, shoved them behind inadequate cover. And when the explosion bloomed white-hot across the screen, she folded herself over them like a biological barrier. The footage cut to static. Vok set down his drink. That's just reflex. Panic response. Panic responses involve fleeing, not advancing. Zacht was staring at his calculations again, adjusting variables. Unless wait. What if humans have inverted threat assessment? What if their neural architecture processes vulnerable individuals as higher priority than personal safety? That's functionally suicidal. That's functionally human. Moru drained her drink. There's another possibility you're both ignoring. What if they genuinely believe sacrifice is meaningful? Not strategically meaningful, spiritually meaningful. What if they think their lives become valuable specifically at the moment they give them away? That's the most horrifying thing I've heard all week, Vok said. That's the ledger. Moru gestured at the datapad. 6,000 examples of people deciding that dying for something matters more than living for nothing. The Anthony journalist arrived with an entourage, which was the first sign this would go badly. Her name was Kira, and she moved through the medical facility like a documentary was already filming, which, given the 2 camera drones hovering behind her, it probably was. She wore what passed for professional attire among her species. Sleek dark feathers groomed to geometric precision and a small translation device clipped to her neck that rendered her chirping speech into flawless. Standard. The teacher, whose name the media had helpfully decided was less important than her ledger number, was sitting up in bed when Kira swept into the room. The bandages had been reduced to smaller patches, revealing new skin that looked too pink, too fragile. She was eating something gray from a medical tray and not enjoying it. "I'm not doing this," she said immediately. Kira's head tilted at that particular avian angle that suggested polite disregard. "The interview has been approved by Facility Administration and Earth's Colonial Liaison Office. Your consent was assumed. Unassume it. I've traveled 4 systems to be here." Kira settled onto a perch the medical staff had installed. Apparently, they'd anticipated this. The camera drones positioned themselves at flattering angles. "Surely you can spare 20 minutes to discuss your experience." My experience was getting exploded. There. Interview complete. Kira's feathers ruffled. Irritation, probably, though Anthony body language was notoriously difficult to read. "The galaxy is fascinated by ledger inductees. Your story has inspired millions. Parents are showing their children your footage as an example of what? How to get second-degree burns in a school zone." The teacher set down her tray. "I'm not inspiring. I'm a cautionary tale about insufficient reactor maintenance. Protocols. You saved 17 lives. I did my job. Your job description doesn't include self-immolation. It includes keeping students safe." The method was improvised. She looked directly at one of the camera drones. "Are those things recording right now?" "Yes, for the documentary series Legends Living, Conversations with the Ledger. It's been shortlisted for 3 major awards. Turn them off." "The agreement. I didn't sign an agreement. I was unconscious for 6 days. You can't consent someone into being your emotional content." Kira made a gesture with her wing arm that the translation device rendered as a sigh. "You humans have such fascinating discomfort with acknowledgement. Most species who achieve ledger status leverage it for social advancement. Speaking engagements, memoir deals. Most species probably didn't achieve ledger status by having a building fall on them. You didn't just have a building fall on you. You chose to position yourself as a barrier between vulnerable individuals and certain death." Kira leaned forward, her tone shifting to something that might have been genuine curiosity. "Why? Because they were in danger, and you weren't?" "I was already there. Leaving would have taken longer than staying. That's not what the footage shows. You had a clear exit path. 3.7 seconds to reach the doorway before containment failed. Instead, you went deeper into the room. Kira's head cocked the other direction. The math is compelling. You made a choice that reduced your survival probability from 38% to less than 4%. That's not instinct. That's decision. That's prioritization of others over yourself. Of children over an adult with more mass to absorb kinetic energy. Yes. Kira went silent for a moment, her feathers settling into something that resembled stillness. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its performative quality. Do you genuinely not understand why this matters to people? I understand that people want narratives that make sense. Teacher protects students. Teacher becomes hero. Everyone feels good about the universe having moral order. The teacher shifted, wincing slightly. But that's not what happened. What happened was a reactor failed, and I made a split-second calculation that putting my body between an explosion and some kids might reduce the blast impact. It wasn't noble. It was geometry. You're describing heroism as physics. I'm describing physics as physics. Heroism is what people call it afterward to avoid confronting how fragile everything actually is. One of the camera drones moved closer. Kira didn't stop it. You're quite bitter for someone who saved 17 lives. I'm tired of being mythologized for basic decency. The teacher looked at Kira directly. You want to know why humans keep ending up on the ledger? It's not because we're special. It's because we're surrounded by systems that fail constantly, and someone has to be there when they do. The only difference is that we're stupid enough to stay. That's not what your species says. Earth's diplomatic channels are framing you as an example of humanity's extraordinary compassion. Earth's diplomatic channels can frame me however they want. I'm not a recruitment poster. And yet, Kira gestured with her wing at something beyond the room. Applications to colony teaching positions have increased 47% since your footage went viral. Human applications, specifically. People want to be like you. Then people are idiots. Or perhaps they recognize something worth emulating. The teacher laughed, sharp and humorless. You want the truth? The real, unedited, not dash good dash for dash your dash documentary truth. Kira's translator device clicked. Always. I'm angry. Every single day I'm angry that I had to make that choice. That the reactor failed. That the safety systems didn't work. That 17 children were in danger because some contractor cut corners on containment shielding. She gestured at her bandaged arms. This isn't heroism. This is the consequence of systemic negligence. And instead of investigating why the explosion happened, everyone wants to celebrate that I survived it. Those aren't mutually exclusive. They are when the celebration distracts from the investigation. Kira's feathers did something complicated. Consideration, maybe. Or recalculation. You're not going to give me an inspiring soundbite, are you? I'm not going to lie to make your audience feel better about living in a universe where children need last-minute human shields. What if I told you that 17 families have requested to meet you? To thank you personally? The teacher's expression shifted. Something cracked behind the exhaustion. They want to? She stopped, her jaw working. I don't care what they want. I don't want gratitude. I don't want recognition. She stopped. I want the kids to be okay. That's all. Everything else is noise. The room went very quiet. Even the camera drones seemed to hover in respectful stillness. Dr. Kev chose that moment to enter, datapad in hand. He took one look at the scene, Kira, the cameras, the teacher's rigid posture, and made a clicking sound deep in his throat. Interview's over. We haven't finished. You have. My patient's heart rate has elevated 14%. Blood pressure is approaching problematic ranges. Your documentary can survive without footage of her having a medical episode. Kev moved between Kira and the bed, a physical barrier. Leave. Kira stood slowly, her feathers rearranging themselves into something like dignity. For what it's worth, I think you're wrong about yourself. Noted. The teacher didn't look at her. Kira pulled up audio recordings. The teacher's voice, exhausted and bitter. I'm angry. Every single day I'm angry that I had to make that choice. This is not stable psychology. This is trauma manifesting as self-destructive behavior. We should not celebrate it. We should treat it. Kira returned to her seat. The chamber buzzed with quiet conversation, species conferring among themselves. Kel's throat sac inflated slightly. The defense may now present their case. The teacher stood and walked to the platform. No notes, no prepared statement. Just the truth, delivered in the same flat tone she'd used with Kira. My name is Rachel Dawn. First time she'd used it publicly since the explosion. I've been teaching for 8 years. I've worked with children from 15 different species across 6 stations. I hold advanced certifications in mixed species development, trauma-informed education, and emergency crisis response. She pulled up her own display. Class photos, graduation records, letters from parents and former students. The consortium says I'm psychologically aberrant because I chose to protect my students instead of abandoning them. They say this makes me dangerous, unpredictable, a liability. She changed the display. Medical reports from the 17 children who'd been in the classroom that day. Minor injuries, moderate burns, all healed. No permanent damage. These are the results of my pathological behavior. 17 children who went home to their families, who continued their education, who are alive because someone decided their survival mattered more than perfect risk assessment. She looked directly at the Claven representative. You showed footage of me running toward an explosion. You calculated survival probabilities. You proved mathematically that my choice was irrational. She paused. You're right. It was. But it was also the only choice that let me live with myself afterward. You say humans have inverted threat assessment, that we process danger incorrectly, that our protective responses override survival programming. She pulled up new data. Here's what you didn't mention. In the 15 years since humans began working in mixed species facilities, mortality rates for juvenile populations have dropped by 19%. Emergency response times have improved. Survival rates during station failures have increased. The chamber went quiet. You call it pathology. I call it doing the job. Because teaching isn't just curriculum and lesson plans. It's standing between children and every danger this universe throws at them. It's being the adult who stays when systems fail. It's being the one who decides that their future matters more than your survival statistics. She closed the displays. The consortium wants humans removed from positions of influence. They want us screened, evaluated, controlled. Because we're unpredictable. Because we make choices that don't calculate neatly into risk-benefit matrices. She met Kelv's eyes. I can't promise I won't do it again. I can't promise I'll always choose survival over protection. I can only promise that if another reactor fails, if another emergency happens, if another group of children needs someone to stand between them and danger, I'll be there. If that makes me dangerous, then you should probably fire me. But understand what you're really saying. The human should apologize for caring more about children than ourselves. That we should be punished for refusing to let vulnerability equal expendability. She stepped back from the platform. I'm not a hero. I'm not legendary. I'm just a teacher who believes that some things matter more than survival. If that's aberrant psychology, then I'm glad to be aberrant. The chamber erupted. Not in agreement or disagreement, but in something more complicated. Recognition, maybe. Or uncertainty. KELV called for order. Throat sac working overtime. We will hear additional testimony before rendering judgment. Marcus Webb stood. Ledger number 4903. I'd like to speak. Marcus Webb was older than Rachel, with the kind of weathered appearance that came from decades in space. His prosthetic hands were visible high-quality synthetic limbs that moved with near-perfect articulation. I lost these, he raised both hands, rerouting a fusion leak on a cargo hauler. I had 3 minutes to shut down the primary conduit before the entire ship went critical. 43 people on board. Standard procedure says you evacuate and let the automated systems handle it. He paused, looking at his artificial fingers. Automated systems were failing. Someone had to go manual. I went, got the job done. Lost my hands to radiation exposure, but everyone lived. He turned to face the Claven Consortium representatives. You want to know what's wrong with humans? Here it is. We remember what matters. Not survival rates or probability calculations. We remember that 43 people had families, had futures, had lives worth more than my hands. Another human stood. A woman with burn scars visible along her neck. Ledger number 5218. I stayed behind during a medical station fire to finish surgery on a vein child. 7 years old. Brain tumor removal, halfway through the procedure. I could have evacuated. Should have, according to protocol. She touched her scars. But that child was unconscious on my table. Abandoning her meant she'd die, either from the tumor or the fire. So I stayed. Finished the surgery. Got her to the evacuation shuttle before the station's oxygen systems failed. She smiled slightly. She graduated university last year. Sent me a message thanking me for, quote, being too stupid to leave. One by one, Ledger inductees stood. Each one telling their story. Not as legends. As humans who'd faced impossible choices and chosen conscience over calculation. Security officer who'd held a bulkhead closed during decompression until rescue arrived. A colonist who'd shielded a mixed-species family during a meteor strike. An engineer who'd manually vented a toxic gas leak instead of sealing herself in a safe room. Each story the same at its core. Someone needed help, I was there. Survival was negotiable. The Claven representative tried to interrupt. This is not testimony. This is a parade of psychological instability. This, Marcus Webb said sharply, is evidence. You claim humans are too dangerous for positions of authority. We're showing you what dangerous actually means. It means children survive. It means families stay together. It means people go home at the end of the day because someone decided math mattered less than lives. Cal's throat sac was fully inflated now. Stress, uncertainty. The consortium has presented compelling statistical analysis. Statistics don't raise children. This from a Gren in the audience, all 4 arms raised. I'm Vectoron. My daughter was in Rachel Dorn's class on Outpost 9. She had an allergic reaction to something in the air filtration system. Went into shock. Ms. Dorn recognized the symptoms, administered emergency medication, held her stable until medical arrived. Vec's voice cracked. Your statistics would have let my daughter die while we waited for proper protocols. Another voice, Santhary. My son was one of the 17. He was hiding behind a desk when the reactor alarm went off. He saw Ms. Dorn running toward him, not away. He saw her cover him with her body when the explosion hit. The Anthony parents' feathers were bristling. You call that pathology? I call that the reason my son is alive. More voices. More stories. A Threskin whose sibling had been saved by a human medic. A Claven whose research partner was a Ledger inductee. A Vane who'd served on an emergency response team with humans and learned that unpredictable meant reliable when it matters most. The chamber was chaos now, dozens of species shouting to be heard. Kelv tried to restore order, but the momentum had shifted. This wasn't about one teacher anymore. It was about whether the galaxy punished the beings who refused to let others suffer alone. Finally, Kelv called for silence. Their throat sac had settled into something that might have been resolution. This hearing has presented two opposing views of human behavior. The consortium argues that human protective responses represent dangerous psychological aberration. The defense argues that these responses represent valuable, even essential contributions to mixed-species communities. They paused, consulting with other arbiters on the panel. Quiet discussion, untranslated. The panel has reached a decision. The chamber went silent. We find that the Claven Consortium's complaint lacks sufficient evidence to justify systematic employment. Restrictions against humans in educational, medical, or security positions. While human behavioral patterns differ from galactic norms, these differences have not resulted in harm to vulnerable populations. In fact, Kelv's throat sac inflated slightly. The evidence suggests the opposite. Human presence in these fields has improved outcomes across measured categories.